Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nancy, the Relationship Manager at Law Mentor. Welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic Process of Filing Suits under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code IBC. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our guest speaker of this event, Mr. Vishnu Tandi. Mr. Vishnu Tandi is a corporate lawyer and currently working in Tamil Nadu Mercantile Bank as a law officer. Before joining TMB, he has worked in the National Company Law Tribunal, Chennai, and Jaipur benches. He has a rich experience and expertise in matters pertaining to Companies Act and Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code IBC and other aspects of business and corporate laws in India. He is a gold medalist and postgraduate in corporate law. He is also the founder of Lex Coach Publications. He has published numerous articles and research papers in national and international journals. He has been awarded as Budding Achiever by International Institutional Organization. He has also been awarded by the Indian National Bar Association for his outstanding performance. Vishnu sir, you can start the webinar. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, our topic is process of filing suit under IBC 2016. Here, I would like to substitute the word suit with the word application because the adjudicating authority, which are DRT and NCLT for IBC, they are not a court of law. They are the adjudicatory authorities. So they do not decide the matters, they adjudicate the matter. So whatever matters refer to the NCLT and DRT are called application and not the suit. So the topic would be process of filing application under Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. This act was enacted in year 2016, November 2016, to consolidate all the existing laws of insolvency and bankruptcy which were prevailing in India. In IBC, there are two adjudicating authorities. One is DRT and one is NCLT. DRT deals with the insolvency proceedings of the individual and partnership firms, but the provisions of the individuals and partnership have not been notified yet. So many of us are not aware that DRT also deals with the IBC. The provisions of corporate persons and the limited liability partnerships have been notified in 2016. In the first case, which was admitted under CIRP, was Synergy Dure Automotive Limited, which was admitted in 14/8/2017. For IBC, we already had law for insolvency, which was Presidency Towns Insolvency Act 1909 and Provincial Insolvency Act 1920. Then why there was a need for a new act for insolvency and bankruptcy? For understanding this, we have to go into the details and history of the IBC. Prior to IBC, India did not have a single law dealing with all aspects of a company and company of financial distress. Instead, there were multiple laws, such as SICA, Sikh Industrial Companies Act, which deals with the insolvency of rehabilitation of industrial companies. Companies Act, which deals with the liquidation process, and the SARFAESI Act, which deals with the recovery by the banks, and the recovery of debts due to bank and financial institution, which also deals with the recovery by the financial institutions. These laws were there, but there was no uniform process. Like there is no single step that when application can be filed until till final disposal or till the liquidation of a company, it will run in a only in one judicial forum. This procedure, this kind of mechanism was not there. That's why there was a need for a uniform law, and there was a requirement for one platform where from the filing of application till the liquidation of a company or till the dissolution of a company, whole process will go on a single platform. That's why this need emerged. Apart from that, there were many loopholes in the SICA Act. SICA Act is basically incorporated to identify the. This act was enacted to identify or detect the potential sick companies. So under SICA Act, one board was constituted, that was Board of Industrial Financial Reconstruction, and then there was one appellate board. What they used to do, when application is made, when a corporate person approached to BIFR, they will, there was also time framework, but that was a time consuming process. First, they will evaluate whether this company is really sick company, whether there is any chance for revive this company. After analyzing all these things, parties may approach to appellate tribunal. That will also take some time. After going through these process, BIFR and AIFR, which is appellate authority, if no resolution comes, no revival plan is coming forth, they have to file application before High Court, because High Court was only having power of liquidation. BIFR was not empowered with the power of liquidation. So there was also multiplicity of jurisdiction. One is BIFR, then appellate tribunal, then High Court. And once a matter has been admitted in BIFR, no winding up petition can be filed in High Court till all the process from BIFR to AIFR completed, and no recovery suit can be filed against such company. So these companies started taking benefit of these loopholes. Again, another reason was that World Bank issued one index that is called Ease of Doing Business. In 2015, India's rank was 137 out of 189 countries. So it was very shameful for India. So basically this index is prepared based on various indicators such as time, cost, recovery rate for creditors, and the management of debtors' assets during the insolvency proceeding. So India's rank was 137 out of 189. So India thought that we should amend our laws, we should come up with a new laws to speed up the process of recovery and to do the improve our ranking in ease of doing business. So when committee was formed, that committee is called Bankruptcy Law Reform Committee. Bankruptcy Law Reform Committee suggested that there should be a one-stop destination, there should be a one-stop law which can deal with entire insolvency proceedings, from the filing of application, from the filing of application for insolvency, from the filing application for resolution, until the liquidation or revival of a company. All the proceedings should continue at a one step, one judicial forum. So they suggested that we should come up with a new law. So as per the recommendation of this committee, this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 was enacted. This act consolidates all the existing laws of the insolvency and bankruptcy. Now, as per this law, who can file application under IBC? Before we come with this topic, we should mention that regarding NCLT, before NCLT, there was a judicial form that is called Company Law Board, CLB. That was dissolved in 2002. One committee was constituted. That committee recommended NCLT, but that did not materialize. In 2013, Companies Act was new Companies Act came into force. There they provided provision for constitution of national company law tribunals. So this act was already enacted. Provisions for formation of a setup of a national company law tribunal was already provided in the act. So insolvency and bankruptcy law also provides that this adjudication power should be given to NCLT. So NCLT was given power to adjudicate all the matters of a corporate insolvency and the insolvency of limited liability partnership. And another was individual insolvency and partnership insolvency of partnership funds. That has not been yet notified, but it has been informed that this power will be given to DRT. Now we come to the topic that who can file application. So there are three categories who can file application. One is financial creditor, second is operational creditor, and third is corporate debtor itself. So first we have to understand who are the financial creditors. Definition is given under section 5 clause 7 of the IBC. As per that definition, financial creditor is any person to whom a financial debt is owed. This is very open-ended definition. So for understanding this definition, we have to understand what is financial debt. Financial debt has also been defined in IBC. It says a financial debt is a debt along with interest, if any, which is disbursed against the consideration for the time value of money. Here we have to understand what is consideration for the time value of money. This word is very new, time value of money. We will understand it with the example that if money is given to one person for a specific period of time, this money should return to the creditor with the interest part. It should not come as it was given. Like, for example, if one person or one financial institution, suppose one bank has given loan, or for example, any private person has a given loan of rupees 1 lakh, after 5 years, it should come 1,50,000 or 15,000, 25,000, whatever. But it should not come same amount. It should not come 1 lakh rupees. There should be a consideration for time value of money, because with the lapse of time, this money should increase. So this is the basic criteria to understand whether it is really a financial debt or not. That party has to prove in a court that this money was disbursed against the time value of money. This value was disbursed for the consideration of time value of money. Now, what can be the, for example, what all type of transaction can be the time value of money? So money borrowed against repayment of interest, money raised against any accepted credit facility, money raised through instrument like bonds, notes, debenture, or similar instrument, any amount raised through transaction like forward sale or purchase agreement. These kind of transactions are called financial debt. Here one word is forward sale. Forward sale is also a new term. What is forward sale? For example, if one person has given financial credit and financial facility to any person, he will say that I will return this money when you will sell this property. I will adjust this money with you. For example, if one mining company is there, so they will extract the mineral from the land. So they will from the distributor, they will collect some money. They will say that when I will extract the money and sell in the market, I will sell it to you, and you adjust this money. That is forward sale. So these kind of transactions comes within the purview of financial transactions, and that the outstanding will consider as financial debt. Now, what is operational creditor? Section 9 of IBC deals with operational creditor, and the word operational creditor has been defined in section 5, clause 20. It says financial creditor is any person to whom operational debt is owed. It is operational creditor means to whom operational debt is owed. Again, it is open-ended definition. What can be operation debt? Operation debt can be if any person has provided goods, any person has provided any services. So goods and services will comes under the category of operational debts. Then the employment salary of employees, that will also come under the operational creditor and operational debt. So they can file under section 9. This law is still evolving. So with the passage of time, many judgments has come. For example, I would like to share some experience that when I was in NCLT, we used to admit applications if any person on the basis of lease, they are filing that lease rent or lease has not been paid to me. That used to be considered as operational creditor at that particular of time. But now NCLAT has cleared in one of case that lease dues is not an operational debt. That cannot be considered as an operational debt. Now we come to the filing of application. So first we will deal with the application by financial creditor. When financial creditor file application, he has to file under section 7 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code along with some documents. What are the documents? So he has to he has to prove there is a default. So any document to prove there is a default, he has to file some document to that extent. And limitation period, he has to ascertain that it is within limitation, because earlier it was Limitation Act 137 was not applicable, but now Limitation Act is also applicable to the IBC matters. Earlier there was perception that the IBC Act was came in 2016 and the Limitation Act is enacted earlier. So this right accrued only in 2016. So Limitation Act cannot be applied in IBC matters. But now after the many judgments of Supreme Court like Mobilix Innovation, now Limitation Act also applicable to the IBC matters. Now, who are the financial creditors? And who all can find under category of financial creditor? Financial creditor either itself or jointly with the, like one bank single can file, or file with another banks like consortium, they can file application. Any government notified person such as a guardian, executor or administrator of an estate of a trustee, or a person duly authorized by board of director of a company, they can file application under section 7. In case of if financial creditor is in form of securities, so depositor can file application. But in case of filing application by depositor, they individually cannot file. For that, they have to either they should be number of 100 or 10% of total number of of depositors. Jointly, they can file. Same thing in class of creditors also, either they can file jointly with the number of 100 or 10% of the total number. Now, home buyers have also been included in the category of financial creditor. Same categories, same provisions apply to them. Home buyers individually cannot file. They should constitute 100, at least number of 100 or 10% of total number of creditors. Jointly, they can file application under section 7. Now, what is minimum default amount for filing application under section 7? Default amount is rupees 1 lakh at the time of enactment of the act, and it was continued till March 2020. But in March 2020, government has came up with a notification that because of this pandemic COVID-19, many MSME business will go away because of filing application, because 1 lakh is very small amount, and even a single payment of rupees, even in a single transaction amount will exceed 1 lakh rupees, because 1 lakh is very small amount. So now they have increased this limit to 1 crore rupees. So next comes with a filing application. These were the class of creditors under financial creditor category. Now, how they will file application? They have to file as per Rule 4 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Application to Adjudicating Authority rules. They have to file application in Form 1. There are many forms in the rules of application to Adjudicating Authority rules 2016. So Form 1, they have to file application along with certain documents. What are the documents? One document is record of default recorded with information utility. Many of us are not aware about what is information utility. This is also a new concept. When this act was enacted, this information utility word was discretionary. It was written as if available. But after amendment, now it has become mandatory. After 12/5/2020, the record of default with the information utility has been made mandatory. Without that, application will not be entertained. What is information utility? One organization has been constituted who are keeping record of all the debts. So financial creditor has to take one certificate from the information utility. They can generate it online, but for that they have to upload all the records on the information utility portal from the beginning, at the time of disbursement of loan till the before the filing application. They have to update everything on the information utility. They will produce one certificate that yes, debt is due. So adjudicating authority will consider that as a evidence of default and pass an order. Why this need was also emerged? Because in many cases NCLT used to go into details that whether this default is genuine or not, whether it is hypothecated, whether it is developed at a later point of time. So in order to save the time of tribunals, they have implemented this thing that information utility, if given in giving any record of default, that will be sufficient to prove a default. Another thing, another important thing is that financial creditor has to suggest one name of interim resolution professional, and they have to get consent from them in form 32, and any proceedings against the such proposed resolution professional should not be instituted. So these things they have to file along with the application in the NCLT, and they have to send the copy of these forms, these application which they are going to file in NCLT. They have to send one copy to the corporate debtor at their registered office. After accepting the application by NCLT, time framework has been given to NCLT that within 14 days they have to decide whether they have to admit it or reject it. They have to decide it within 14 days. But generally it does not happen. Now many cases has come, such as Surendra Trading Company versus Jungilal Complex case has come, where NCLT has held that this discretion which has given under section that within 14 days they have to admit or reject. This is a directory, not mandatory. This may take more time because none of the cases were admitted or rejected in 14 days, because judiciary, it will take some time because they have to issue notice to the other party pass in orders. The notice and the party is not appearing, in such case they can pass ex parte order, but without giving proper notice they cannot pass order. So obviously it will take time. Even delivery will take at least 6 or 7 days. So court now has held that this is this is directory and not a mandatory. So NCLT what has to see in the application under section 7? NCLT has to see only two things: whether default has occurred, second, application is complete, and third thing is any disciplinary action is pending against the proposed IRP or not. Only three things NCLT will see. If all these three things are available, they will accept. If there is no default, or if the application is incomplete, or any disciplinary proceedings are instituted against the IRP, NCLT will give 7 days time to the creditors to rectify the defect. If they are not able to rectify, NCLT may reject the application. This is the process for filing application under section 7. Now comes to section 9 application. Section 9 is application by operational creditors. On occurrence of default in repayment by operational creditors, they can approach to NCLT. Same amount, default amount 1 lakh rupees, now it has increased to 1 crore rupees. But slight difference is there in case of operational creditor. In case of operational creditors, it is two-step procedure. First, they have to issue demand notice under section 8. As per the section 7 application is concerned, there is no need for issue demand notice to the corporate debtors, but in case of section 9, they has to issue one demand notice to corporate debtors. In demand notice also, there is two step. Not step, actually there are two types of demand notice. One is form 3, one is form 4. What is difference in both? Form 3 is simple demand notice that this much amount is due to us. You have to pay it within 10 days. Otherwise, we are going to take action against under section 9 against you. Such kind of notice they have to give under form 3. Same like SARFAESI Act. Slight difference is that in SARFAESI Act, this demand notice has to be issued by the bank officers, who is scale 4 officer. He is authorized person, he can issue notice. But as far as section 9 is concerned, section 8 is concerned of IBC, this demand notice can be issued by the advocate also, and the issued by advocate is valid. Now demand notice in form 4 is, if any invoice is there, that same invoice can be forwarded to the corporate debtors requesting them to clear the invoice. That is demand notice under form 4. So this is two ways demand notice. Now, now what we have to decide, how we can decide that whether we have to issue demand notice under Form 3 or under Form 4. That is also clarified by Honorable Anclate in one of the judgment, that this power is not a discretionary. It depends on the facts and situation of case to case. It is not like that in all the cases we can issue demand notice under Section 8 in Form 3, and it is not that in all the case we can issue demand notice under Form 4. If invoice was generated at the time of transaction, then demand notice can be issued under Form 4. And if this invoice was generated at the time of transaction, invoice is genuine, then invoice can be sent. But where invoice was not generated at the time of transaction, but it was later on generated, any other date it was generated, then party has to issue demand notice under section 8 in Form 3. And when party is issuing notice under Form 3, no need to annex the invoices. Demand notice itself is sufficient to prove. Within 10, now we have issued demand notice to the parties. Now what is the duty of corporate debtors? Corporate debtor has to respond within 10 days. What they can respond? They can raise objection that there is a default. They can raise objection that there is a no default, there is a dispute, there is an existing dispute, or they can say that we have already made the payment. If they say that we have already made the payment, they have to prove, they have to send attested documents by which they have made the payments. Or if they have already, they have not made the payment, they can make payment within 10 days. These options are available with the corporate debtors. Now things arises, and with the evolving time, this issue was also emerged that when party is issuing, when the operational creditor is issuing demand notice, corporate debtors start generating dispute. They will file objections. They will say that there is already dispute, some quantity dispute. And when the application is filed in IBC, in reply they will say that there was an existing dispute. So Honorable Anclate has come up with the judgment in Ahluwalia Contractors Limited versus Raisa Developers, that the dispute which corporate debtor is raising, it should be pre-existing. Pre-existing means before issuing demand notice, so this dispute should be in existence. Whether party should have filed any case against them, whether they should have filed any claim before the operational creditor regarding any quantity or quality issue, any communication which was communicated between the parties before issuing the demand notice only can be considered as a pre-existing dispute. After issuing demand notice, if party comes with a version that there was a dispute, that will not be entertained, and NCLT will not entertain such kind of dispute, and application will not be rejected merely on the ground that there was a dispute. So this process is this is the demand notice issuing process. Now comes to the filing of application under Section 9. When party files application under Section 9, they have to file it.
Sir, just a second. Sir, your speaker has been muted. You're not audible, sir.
Yeah. Now it is audible.
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
So now we comes to the filing process of filing under Section 9. When party files under Section 9, they have to produce invoice demanding payment. They have to produce the demand notice which they have served to the corporate debtors, and one affidavit stating that there is no dispute. That is called no dispute affidavit under Section 9(3)(b). So these things they have to file, and along apart from that, they have to file one certificate from the financial institution evidencing that no such payment has been credited in that account, and copy of any record with information utility, and any other proof confirming that there is default in the repayment. There is a default in the payment of outstanding operational debt. So these things they have to file. And the operational debtor has to serve this application to the corporate debtor at their registered office. After filing application, same 14 days time is with the NCLT. Within 14 days, they can either accept the application or reject the application. What adjudicating authority will see in section 9 application, they will see whether the application is complete, whether there is any undue payment, whether there is a dispute. Only dispute thing NCLT will see extra as compared to the section 9 section 7 application. In section 7 only default is there, any application is complete and no disciplinary proceedings. Three things. In section 9 they will see any default is there, any dispute is there. And then proposing resolution professional in section 9 application is optional. Party may propose, may not propose. If party propose, then well and good. If party does not propose, then NCLT will appoint resolution professional from the list provided by the IBBI, that is Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India. As per the process, it is that NCLT has to ask from IBBI to recommend one person, and within 10 days they have to give, the IBBI has to suggest. But in practically what happens, IBBI gives one list to the NCLT that from this list you can appoint any person as a resolution professional in the section 9 applications. Now comes to the application by the corporate debtors. Corporate debtors can file application under section 10. For corporate debtor, filing application by corporate debtor under section 10, one requirement is that they have to pass one special resolution with 2/3 majority for filing application. First thing, that there should be one default of ₹1 lakh rupee, and then they have to pass one resolution. In case of limited liability partnership, there should be consent from the designated partners. So after getting these things, they can file application under section 10. Section 11 deals with the ineligibility, who cannot file application. Section 11 says if CIRP is already undergoing or any corporate debtor is undergoing CIRP, they cannot file application under section 10. If financial creditor has defaulted in any terms of conditions, in any insolvency proceedings, in any CIRP proceedings initiated 12 months prior to this application, then financial creditor cannot make an application. So these are ineligibility criteria provided under section 11 of the IBC. Now come to the CIRP. CIRP is a step-by-step process. Once application is rejected, then application is dismissed. But if application is admitted, then CIRP start. So first step of CIRP is that appointment of interim resolution professional. NCLT will appoint one person as interim resolution professional, which is a qualified person and recommended by IBBI. So IRP will take over the charge of corporate debtors, and all the directors of the corporate debtors will be sent out, because once the application is admitted, all the control comes, all the management comes in the power of NCLT, and NCLT gives this power to IRP to run this company. IRP will run this company as a going concern till any resolution plan comes or till this company goes into liquidation. So IRP will be appointed for 30 days. Within 30 days, this is first step of appointment of IRP. Within 30 days, IRP will constitute committee of creditors. He will issue public announcement. So first task of IRP will be public announcement. Step 2 or first task of IRP will be public announcement. IRP will make public announcement that this corporate debtor has been admitted under CIRP, and if any default is, if any claim is there from any creditors, they can file claim to the they can file their claim. So public announcement will be second step. Third step will be submission of claim. Financial creditors shall submit their claim in electronic form, and if any operational debt is due, they can file their claims in the form of in person or by post or by any other modes. They can file their claims. After that, IRP will form a committee of creditors. What is committee of creditors? They will form a committee on the basis of claim received. In COC, only the financial creditor will be made part of COC. Operational creditor cannot be part of COC. Now, after some judgments, operational creditors can also be made part of COC, but meeting of COC. So IRP will form a committee of creditors after accepting claims from all the claimants. Now step 5 comes. Within 30 days, IRP has to do these things, and he has to conduct one COC meeting. Now comes a next step. In next step, COC will recommend whether this IRP, which was appointed by NCLT, should continue as a resolution professional or they want to replace it. So in this COC meeting, they will decide it, and they will approach to court. They will approach to NCLT and submit that their decision. They will tell to NCLT whether this person IRP should continue as a resolution professional or they want to replace the resolution professional. So IRP will act only for 30 days. After 30 days, IRP will be converted into resolution professional RP. Now what RP will do? RP will prepare information memorandum. What is information memorandum? IRP will collect all the information that what kind of debts due, what all are the claimants, what business he is doing. Means like a prospectus he will prepare one where he will provide all the details of the company, basic purpose, what was the basic purpose, what was the object of the company, now what is the assets, what is the liabilities of the company, who all are the creditors of the company. Like that he will prepare one information memorandum. Next step comes preparation of resolution plan. After preparing information memorandum, they will circulate it in the newspapers, and they will call for resolution plans. So any person who are interested to revive the company, or who are interested, in simple word, if we say, if any one person who wants to purchase this company, they will submit a resolution plan. What will be conditions in the resolution plan? In resolution plan, a resolution applicant should should mention that how he is going to revive this company, because main motive of the IBC is to revive the business. So he has to mention all the terms. He has to mention all the plans in the resolution plan, that how he is going to revive this business. But apart from reviving the business, he has to pay outstanding to the creditors also. So he will obviously he will not pay full to all the creditors. So he will propose that outstanding is 25 lakhs. He will say that I am ready to revive this company in 20 lakhs. So 5 lakhs haircut creditors has to give. So in proportionate, they will give like how much amount he will give to the operational creditors, how much amount he will give to the financial creditors, and now what will be his next plan, how he will revive this company, how he will again stand this company in the competitive market. So all these things he will provide in the resolution plan. Resolution professional will collect all these plans, and he will produce these plans in the committee of creditors. He will call meeting of committee of creditors, and he will put forth this plan before the COC, and he will ask their recommendation. COC will see the viability of the resolution plan. They have to see whether this plan is really acceptable, whether this plan is viable, whether this can really revive this company or this is just to gain the management of the company. So they have to see all the ins and outs of the resolution plan. So after that, they have to, if the resolution plan is acceptable to the COC, they will put forth this before the NCLT. NCLT is the final authority who will approve the plan. As per the one of the judgment of NCLAT, COC decision of COC has been given paramount status, that this viability and feasibility of the plan can only be decided by the committee of creditors. So NCLT is only a signing authority who will put a stamp that plan has been approved. But anyway, they have to, whether they are going to accept or they are going to reject this plan, they have to report it to the NCLT. NCLT generally NCLT cannot make any amendment in the plan, but in Binani Industries and some cases NCLT has interfered and they have made some amendment in the plans. So the IRP, the resolution professional, after the obtaining consent or rejection, he will report to NCLT regarding the outcome of the resolution plan. For this entire process, time framework was decided 180 days. But if in 180 days, if this process is not completed, this can be further processed to further extended to 90 days. So maximum 270 days. Originally it was given as a 270 days, but after amendment, now this period has been extended to 330 days. But one condition has been imposed, that this 330 days includes if any exclusion is given by any court, that time will also be included in 330 days. Earlier, what happens that if maximum time period was given 270 days, and if any other judicial proceedings has been going on, so that particular time used to be excluded from 270 days. But now, after amendment, this process has to be completed, even including that exclusion will be 330 days. 330 days is the final timeline has been given for the resolution of any company. Now come to the liquidation process. If plan is approved, then it will called as a resolution, and this company, the charge of the company will be given to the resolution applicant. But if there is no resolution plan, or resolution plan has been rejected by the COC, then stage comes to the liquidation. So in liquidation, NCLT will appoint one person as a liquidator. RP can be continue as a liquidator. If RP does not want to continue as a liquidator, NCLT can appoint any other person as a liquidator. Liquidator, what he will do, he will prepare a state of company liquidation. So he can sell this process, he can sell the corporate debtor in two processes. Either he can scrape he can sell the scraps of the corporate debtors, like machinery he can sell the buildings to other person, like that he can sell, or he can sell as a going concern. Two ways he can sell. After selling the estate of the corporate debtor, whatever amounts receives, that will be distributed among the creditors. For distribution, there has been provided a mechanism that is called waterfall mechanism, that is provided under section 53 of IBC. In that, this mechanism is given as a priority base. Like first priority will be given to CIRP process, because IRP, RP and liquidator, they are devoting their whole time to revive the business. So first they should be paid their expenses, their fees, they should be paid first. Next comes to the secured creditors, and the 24 months, the salary of employees for the 24 months. Then comes unsecured creditors, then comes operational creditors. Like that, there has been provided a waterfall mechanism based on the priority. Once this liquidation process has been completed, liquidator will file an application before NCLT to dissolve the companies. Dissolution is the final step. After dissolution, company does not exist. So resolution is the final process. Now, after amendment, certain new provisions has been made, which I am going to discuss. We have discussed all the process of filing suit from the application till the resolution. Now, some amendments has been inserted, which I want to discuss. That for resolution plan, earlier it was the provision that any interested person can file application, can produce resolution plan. But after amendment in section 29, section 29A has been introduced that promoter of the corporate debtor cannot submit resolution plan. Why this condition was imposed? Because what happens that the corporate debtors, the promoters of corporate debtors start taking taking the profit of these loopholes, that they will go into the CIRP process, and then they will regain the process, they will regain the control of the management, and they will gain haircut. Like outstanding amount is suppose 1 crore rupees. By submitting resolution plan, they will say I will pay 60,000. If COC agrees to that plan, they have to pay only 60,000. So they start taking benefit of this. So this amendment was brought into force, that the promoters who have contributed in the downfall of the business, they should not be allowed to submit the resolution plan and regain the control of the business. Another thing was that in many cases settlements start taking place. So there was no provision for withdrawal of application. Once the CIRP has been initiated, this will continue till the resolution or liquidation process. There was no process for the withdrawal of the application. But in many cases, parties start facing problem that I'm willing to pay, but there is no option for paying the amount after admitting application. If he wants to pay, he has to pay before the admitting the application. So Section 12A has been inserted, that if 90% of the committee of creditors agrees, then the corporate debt, this application filed before the NCLT can be withdrawn. But consent of 90% of the creditors is mandatory. Another amendment was brought in the percentage of approval for resolution plan. Earlier, for approving a resolution plan, there was 70% vote mandate, but now it has been reduced to 66%. Because many of person will not agree to the resolution plan, because if person is getting lesser amount, he might not be agreeing to the any resolution plan. So it becomes difficult to approve a resolution plan. It become difficult to approve get approval from 75% of the creditors. So this voting percentage has been reduced to 66%. So these are the key amendments which has been introduced. Now, some other data which I would like to narrate. Till December 2019, IBPI provide quarterly based data, but after December 2019, IBSC has not come up with this data. Till December 2019, total 19,000 cases has been filed in NCLT under IBC, out of which 10,086 cases are pending before different benches of NCLT. As per the data available with the IBPI, till December 2019, around 3,300 companies have been admitted for CIRP under IBC. Out of them, only 190 cases has been resolved. 190 company corporate debtor has got resolution plan, while 780 company has gone into liquidation, which is. But one interesting point here is that the companies which has gone into liquidation, the amount outstanding was lesser than the companies who got the resolution plan. So these companies which got the resolution plan, they own 3.8 lakh crore to the creditors. However, the realizable value of the assets available with them when they entered into CIRP was only 77 lakhs, 77.77 crore rupees. So this is the benefit. If the IBC was not in place, if they go into the SARFAESI or any RDBBI Act, Recovery of Debts Due to Bank and Financial Institution Act, realizable value was only 0.77 lakh crore rupees, but through IBC they have got 3.8 lakh crore rupees. So this is the major benefit of IBC. So I will finish this my topic with this on this discussion. Now I am open for the discussion. If any questions arise, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
In case any participant has any question or any query, you can ask it right now from sir. Do we have any queries from the participants? You can unmute your speaker and can ask your query immediately. Sir, I guess you have clarified the topic so well that we don't have any kind of query. It was a very wonderful session with you today. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing useful and informative insights on this topic. I
Thank you
thank
so
all
much.
the participants for attending this webinar till the end. Thank you, everyone. We can end the
Thank
session
you.
now.
Thank you.